Hello and welcome to another lesson on soundproofing. Today I'm going to be talking about how to build a soundproof home office. Usually I talk about home recording studios, but I have a client who I worked with in Bali, Indonesia of all places, which is really fun. And we designed him a soundproof home office. And we just finished up this full set of plans. So I'm going to walk you through the SketchUp model that we have so you can start to understand what we did and how to approach your own soundproofing with a home office. My name is Wilson Harwood, and I am a professional studio designer and acoustician based in Nashville, Tennessee. I design soundproof spaces all over the world. Now, before we jump in, I do have a free resource for you. If you're on this journey, I highly recommend checking out my free soundproofing workshop. You can watch it right away at soundproofyourstudio.com/workshop. All right, let's jump into this lesson on how to soundproof an office. Alrighty, so here is the SketchUp model, and there's a lot going on here, so I'm going to kind of walk you through the overview, and then we'll break it down into all the little pieces here. So to start with, it's just a single office on a concrete slab in basically like a one-floor home in Bali, Indonesia. And this client really wanted these big, beautiful windows that look out into this nice, beautiful area in his yard. And he was annoyed by the sound of bass from a nearby, I think, beach resort, and also just the outside sounds coming into his office and making it hard and difficult to work, which is something we often take for granted, right? Is the idea that working in a quiet place is something that is extremely helpful for our productivity and our mental health. We also added in a few acoustic panels, not for recording or music or anything like that, but mainly for when he's talking or listening to music in the room or having Zoom calls or any sort of meetings. He'll have pristine audio and a great experience in what otherwise would be a very echoey room. You'll also notice that we put in a soffit trap up here, which also doubles as our way to get the ventilation ducting into the room. All right, let's jump into this different aspects of this design so we can really understand what's going on. So to start with, I'm going to look at some of the different wall plans here. So let's take a look at our elevation here first. So we're going to go through and go down. Okay, so here we have the wall section, and what's happening on this design is that there's an existing brick wall with plaster on it right here. And this is acting as our mass on our exterior walls. And it's really nice. In different countries around the world, they don't usually use stick construction, meaning 2x4 wood construction, like we do here in the United States. And so having like a brick or mortar construction, especially plaster on the inside, is great because it just weighs a ton. And as you know, mass is the best way to sound isolate. And then we have a 30 millimeter gap, which is a little bit more than the inch gap I usually do. But I decided to round it up to 30 millimeters instead of the usual 25. And then we're building a metal framed wall on the inside here, and then using 2 layers of this Jaya board, which is 12 millimeter Jaya board. Usually I recommend 5/8 inch drywall. And then right here you might notice these little weird things, and what these are the backer rod and acoustic sealant so that our ceiling and our walls do not technically touch each other, which is helpful. And we've got a fully decoupled ceiling here, which is actually kind of rare that I do this, built off our inside wall. And the existing ceiling is going to be above. Again, it's going to be a concrete ceiling. And so we've got a new ceiling below that is going to provide our isolation there. So pretty cool little design from the wall perspective. Let's take another look here. Here's another example of our wall, and you can see the 2 layers, and then we've got insulation on the back side here in between our wall system. And it's always important that you have to have in some form of fiberglass bat insulation or rock wool. You just need fluffy insulation in your walls and your ceilings when you are isolating. So that is an important step of the process here. The insulation is not shown in this part of the ceiling here. Here you can see the back part of the wall. And this little guy right here is an interesting part of the system as well. So I'm actually going to click on this and just kind of take that out so you can see this a little bit better. But this is what's known as a fire stop, and it blocks fire from traveling between our double wall system. So remember, there is another brick masonry wall right here, And this drywall is actually touching that and blocking it. And you might say, oh my God, Wilson, doesn't that mean they're connected? It actually doesn't, because what's happening here is you've got the rock wool that's connected here, and then our drywall actually does not fully connect, as you can see right here. So this is kind of a clever way to create the fire stop, and then you've also got the LB bracket, which is an isolation bracket that's connecting them at the bottom, and then the drywall doesn't touch our metal studs. We just stuff this rock wool around there and seal it up with fire acoustic sealant or fire caulking, and this creates a fire stop that will meet the International Residential Building Code standards for vertical fire stops on a double wall system every 10 feet at a minimum. So I incorporate those just to meet international codes, and it's always a smart idea when you're dealing with fire safety. Now let's take a little look at the ceiling here. So I just want to go over our ceiling plan. You can see that we've got a set of metal joists again, because that's generally in other countries. They don't use wood as much as we do here in the United States. And we've got some of our OSB as our first layer on the ceiling, and then we've got the Jaya board after that. So we're actually using 18 millimeter, which is roughly around 3/4 inch OSB sheathing for our ceiling. And then over here is actually a new ceiling we're going to put in. When I talk about the HVAC, you'll understand more about that. So let me go through another perspective here so you can kind of see different aspects of the ceiling. There's a side angled view of the ceiling. You can see our windows here too. And let's do one more here. This is the walk-in closet, and we're building a ceiling on top of here. This is just a normal ceiling, nothing soundproof about it, just to hide our baffle boxes that are going to go in through these holes up top here, and we'll get to that in a second. So now let's take a little bit of a view of just the general look of this office. This is what we do for a lot of our clients, just general building plans. And we've got our soundproof door. We're actually going to use the ISO store door, and we're going to ship it from the United States out to Bali, which is not always the case. This is a doorway into a bathroom, so no need to look at that. You can see our baffle box here and some of the stale air coming out from that baffle box. We've got a acoustic panel here as well, and then just some nice SketchUp cool stuff to make it look like an office, so that the client really understands how this place will feel and look in the end. All right, let's take another look here at the, I want to talk a little bit about these Genie clips as well. So these guys are a specialty acoustic clip, and we use them in a few different places. Sometimes I'll use them indoors actually, and we'll put one at the middle part of the door and the top header of the door, and that'll really help hold the door when it's like a 300-pound door in a double wall system without coupling the two walls together. So I just wanted to mention that. And we talked a lot about that. Let's take a look at our door frame here. So the door frame for a soundproof door, this is a single soundproof door, so we're actually going to see the framing here. This will come with the door itself, but then we'll add on this extra piece of wood here. And you'll notice that there's a little gap around the frame that we're going to actually put in with some, we're going to put a little bit of 16th inch rubber that goes behind the entire door frame and actually goes across both walls. And that'll cover up our gap between the door frame and the double wall system. And it'll make sure that sound won't easily pass between the two walls. So that's an important part of this. And we can kind of see a door frame section here. And this is a little bit easier to see. We can see our full door here. We've got the rubber in between, and if you go up here, you'll see the rest of the door frame. And what's cool about the ISO store doors is you don't have to build them yourself. These guys just come shipped right to you, right to the job site. Really great when you're working with a contractor, and they already are like overwhelmed with this project, so shipping them a nice clean door to install is always a good idea. Let's look at this perspective here just to kind of see that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the windows, because these are fully custom soundproof windows here. I do these pretty much on all my projects because it's hard to find a good window supplier that does both exterior and interior soundproof windows. So in this case, it's also a little cheaper, I think, to do your own windows, even though it does take a little bit more labor. But on the outside, we generally put a 1/2 inch tempered glass on the outside, and then we do a 3/8 inch laminate glass on the inside. And let me get you guys just a little bit of this cool window section here, because this is where you can really see what's going on. So at the bottom here, we've got this rubber that we used on the doors. We're going to use that again. You can actually see the black rubber there. And then we put some insulation in there, so that's what this part is here. And then this is the actual window frame itself. And then we've got window trim. We've got this right here is the glazing tape that goes all the way around the window. And then we've got the actual window itself. And then this right here is just a little piece of rubber that the window sits on. And we run that rubber all the way around all four sides of the window. And then this is your quarter round wood stop that holds everything in place. So it's a little weird because we're building a window from scratch. Like we're actually just going to have big rectangular glass pieces and we're going to build this window out. And this is just a thin piece of wood right here. In the United States, you can actually get it at your local hardware store. It's I think let's see what the sizing is on this guy. Yeah, about 1.5 inches, and then this guy right here is about 1/4 inch tall. So that is just a finished piece of wood that's going to cover up the staples from the acoustic fabric that's going over this section right here in our window. And I like to put some desiccant packets down in there just in case there was a little bit of moisture when you install the window. Those desiccant packets will just soak it right up and you won't have any sort of moisture issues around your window at all. So both windows are built exactly the same. Beautiful, beautiful large windows that will stop really a lot of sound. I mean, these are super thick glass and we have dissimilar panes and all this stuff is going to be working. The massive air gap there is going to really help you. A lot of people ask me with windows, they're like, hey Wilson, can I do like a double or triple pane? And I'm like, not really. For thermal reasons, the double or triple pane is great, which is why people do them. For sound, it's not necessarily as good as having two panes really far apart from each other and that are different, dissimilar sizes. In a typical double pane, they're probably 2/4 inch pieces of float glass or something like that. So it's really not going to do much for sound. And you might pay a ton of money for a really great window that still doesn't have a great STC rating in the end. And then another thing is like these STC rated windows that I design, they even go lower in the frequencies just because they're so heavy. So STC ratings don't even account for low bass sounds, so keep that in mind. All right, let's keep on moving here. Let's take a look at the HVAC situation here. So we're using an ERV Life Breath 30, which is just a small unit. It does about 60 CFM, great for just a one-room office, typically one person in there, maybe two at most. Great little system. And then we're running 2 baffle boxes. So one is going to be supplying our fresh air. The baffle boxes make it so that you don't hear the sounds from outside the studio going in through your duct system. So super important part to have on the exterior side of your building or room. And then here we have our return. So that's going to be the air coming back through here and going back into the ERV. For those of you who don't know, an ERV is an energy recovery ventilator. And it's extremely helpful for bringing in fresh air from the outside and then pulling stale air from the inside back to the outside, while also maintaining a good solid relative humidity as well as a good solid temperature in the room. So you're not constantly losing or gaining heat throughout the different seasons of the year. And then we have our intake and our return going up into the attic of this house. We'll certainly have to use insulation around the ducting as it goes through the attic to keep it cool or warm depending on the season, and that will be vented to the outside of the house. All right, let's take another look at this HVAC section here, and we'll get a little idea from another view kind of looking at that. And as you can see, we put in this ceiling mainly just for aesthetic reasons to hide the baffle boxes so that the owner doesn't see them. And let's take one more look at this section here. Now this starts to show how we routed the actual ducting in the room. Once it came into the room, we created one of our soffit bass traps, but we also ran the ducting through that. So here we have the supply air coming in there, and then we have 2 return air vents pulling air back into the ERV. It's a great system. The supply air is going to hit a mini split that you can't see right now over top of the door here, and so that air is going to come in, and then the mini split's going to send the fresh air across the room. And that's the way I usually like to design my fresh air systems when I'm doing these soundproof rooms. You need fresh air in every single soundproof room because you build an airtight room, and we don't want CO2 levels, meaning exhalation, to build up in that room to unsafe levels. So it's a very important aspect of the design. I'm going to look at the baffle boxes really quick here. Let's just take a look at them. So the baffle boxes are mainly made of plywood and then drywall, And then we've got these baffles made of plywood. The black stuff you're seeing here is from a material called duct liner. It's made for HVAC systems, and it's made to absorb sound. So I always use the Second Skin Audio duct liner, and here we'll use it even in Bali. We'll have it shipped out to him because this stuff is really, really good for absorbing sound and also maintaining good airflow through the duct as well, and not causing any mold or bacteria. People always ask me, oh, am I going to get mold growing in there? No, it's rated not to have any fungal growth or anything like that to the standards for any sort of material used in the construction industry. So definitely not a problem there. Now, the chimney is kind of interesting. I always call these chimneys, but basically when we route our ducting through a wall, I designed something called a chimney, and this is basically just a duct system that's really heavy. It's drywall and plywood again, with a little bit of rubber that touches your inside of your drywall interior wall. And what this does is it allows the air to pass through a wall system without it being coupled or sending sound at the same time. So I haven't seen anyone else do this. I think I'm the only one really using this system, but it works great. I've used it on a ton of studio designs, clearly soundproof home offices as well now. And it's a really cool system. Let me see if I can get you guys a better view of this. Here's a section, kind of shows the chimney. This is the plywood and the drywall. And then maybe we'll get one. My designer did these plans, so I actually haven't seen a lot of this. Oh yeah, there we kind of see the whole design. You can see actually the venting here and the chimney as it goes across through the walls. That gives you a bit of an idea. This is actually NOF Ecos insulation that we use, acoustic insulation, to absorb some of the frequencies in the room. And let's see here, what else we got here. And then let's go down here and we can sort of see some of the acoustic panels on our ceiling. These are, I really like to use GIK acoustics most of these days because I think they're the most affordable, and they're built to ship all over the world, which is something that's kind of rare for a lot of these acoustic companies. So since I have clients all over the world, I'm looking for affordability and ease of ordering their products, which GIK really clicks off a lot of those. I do have my local guys here in Nashville that I love to support, but honestly, I hate to say it, these guys are just really ahead of the game in terms of the quality of their acoustic panels and the quality of their business. So yeah, that's pretty much most of it with this whole design here. You guys can see how this all came together. I'm going to do one more look of the whole thing. We also do outlets and light switches. But really, with a soundproof, system, you're looking at soundproof doors, a soundproof concrete floor. You're looking at heavy walls, decoupling either with a double ceiling or a decoupled ceiling using clips. And this double pane window system is really important as well. And then you always have to think about ventilation in your system. So that's why the ERV and the Baffle Boxes are super important. I hope this was helpful in doing a sort of a 10,000 foot view overview. Obviously, the details are where, the rubber really meets the road, and that's where working with a studio designer like myself or a soundproofing expert can be really helpful in just putting all those pieces together. As you do more research, either on my channel or on other people's channels, you're probably going to start to notice that there's an information overload. And as you get to that information overload point, that's usually a good time to reach out to somebody and just get a reality check of whether this is something you want to take on DIY or if it's something you want to really pursue with someone who knows what they're doing and get the highest level possible end product, like this client decided to do with me on their home office design in Bali. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely reach out to me for a Soundproof clarity call. You can just go to soundproofyourstudio.com, and I have a button where you can click and say, I want some quality plans, and you will be linked to a Soundproof clarity call with me where you can just sign up and have a 30-minute Zoom call with me, and we'll go over your project, and I'll help you kind of see some of the blind spots you may have with your own project. Again, my name is Wilson Harwood, and I am a studio designer and acoustician based in Nashville, Tennessee. I build soundproof rooms all over the world, and I'd be happy to help you with yours. Thanks so much for watching, and I will look forward to seeing you next week with more information on sound isolation and room acoustics.